Joseph was born to Jacob and Rachel in Padan Aram, and he was Jacob's favorite son because he was the son of his old age and Rachel, his beloved wife. Joseph's preferential treatment by Jacob was symbolized by a special gift, a richly ornamented coat, often called the coat of many colors. Joseph had two significant dreams when he was 17. In the first dream, he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field when Joseph's sheaf stood upright while his brothers' sheaves gathered around and bowed down to it. In the second dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to Joseph. These dreams implied that Joseph would one day have dominion over his family. When he told his brothers about the dreams, they hated him even more. Even his father, Jacob, rebuked him for his presumptuous dreams, though he kept the matter in mind. Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were pasturing their flocks near Shechem. Joseph traveled from the valley of Hebron to Shechem and then to Dothan, where his brothers were. Seeing Joseph approach, the brothers conspired to kill him. Reuben, the eldest, convinced them not to shed blood, but to throw Joseph into an empty underground reservoir of water instead, intending to rescue him later. While Reuben was away, a caravan of Ishmaelites, Midianite traders, passed by on their way to Egypt. Judah suggested selling Joseph to the traders rather than killing him. The brothers agreed and sold Joseph for 20 shekels of silver. They dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and presented it to Jacob, who believed a wild animal had killed his son. Jacob mourned deeply for Joseph, refusing to be comforted. In Egypt, the Ishmaelites sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. Despite being a slave, Joseph found favor in Potiphar's eyes because the Lord was with him, and everything he did prospered. Potiphar made Joseph the overseer of his household, and the Lord blessed Potiphar's house for Joseph's sake. However, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph. Joseph refused her advances, saying it would be a great sin against God and a betrayal of his master. Potiphar's wife persisted, and one day when they were alone, she grabbed his cloak as he fled from her. She then accused him of trying to rape her, presenting the cloak as evidence. Potiphar, enraged, had Joseph thrown into prison. Even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph, granting him favor with the warden. Joseph was put in charge of all the prisoners, and all that was done there. During his time in prison, Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, who had been imprisoned for offending Pharaoh. The cupbearer dreamt of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he pressed into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph interpreted this dream to mean that in 3 days, the cupbearer would be restored to his position. The baker dreamt of 3 baskets of bread on his head, which birds were eating. Joseph interpreted this dream to mean that in 3 days, the baker would be hanged, and birds would eat his flesh. Both interpretations proved true. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him, and mention him to Pharaoh, to secure his release. However, the cupbearer forgot about Joseph for 2 years. Pharaoh had 2 troubling dreams. In the first, he saw 7 healthy, fat cows come out of the Nile, followed by 7 thin, gaunt cows, that devoured the healthy ones. In the second dream, 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 thin and scorched heads of grain sprouted, and swallowed up the healthy ones. Pharaoh's magicians and wise men could not interpret the dreams. Then the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph, and told Pharaoh about his ability to interpret dreams. Joseph was brought from the dungeon, cleaned up, and presented to Pharaoh. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams as a revelation from God that there would be 7 years of great abundance in Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to appoint a discerning and wise man to oversee the land of Egypt and store surplus grain during the 7 years of abundance to prepare for the famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appointed him as his second in command, giving him the Egyptian name Zaphanath-Paneah and marrying him to Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph collected and stored vast quantities of grain. When the famine arrived, it affected all the surrounding lands, but Egypt had plenty of food because of Joseph's preparations. The famine spread to Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. Hearing that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob sent 10 of his sons to buy food, keeping Benjamin, Rachel's other son, at home. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize him. He accused them of being spies, and detained them for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph released them, keeping Simeon as a hostage, and demanding that they bring Benjamin to prove their honesty. He secretly returned their money in their sacks of grain. The brothers returned to Canaan and told Jacob what had happened. Jacob was reluctant to send Benjamin, but the famine persisted, and they needed more grain. Judah promised to personally guarantee Benjamin's safety, and Jacob reluctantly agreed. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph hosted a feast for them. He was deeply moved upon seeing his younger brother, but kept his emotions in check. Joseph continued to test his brothers. He ordered his steward to fill their sacks with food and secretly place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. The next morning, the brothers were sent on their way. Joseph's steward then pursued them, accusing them of stealing the cup. When the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, the brothers tore their clothes in despair and returned to Joseph's house. Joseph declared that Benjamin would become his slave as punishment. Judah, showing a transformation in character, pleaded with Joseph, offering himself as a substitute for Benjamin. He explained how losing Benjamin would break their father's heart, as Jacob's life was bound up with the boys. Overwhelmed with emotion, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" he said. His brothers were terrified, but Joseph reassured them. He explained that God had sent him ahead to Egypt to save lives through the famine. He urged them not to be angry with themselves for selling him, for it was part of God's plan. Joseph sent his brothers back to Canaan with carts and provisions, inviting Jacob and the entire family to come to Egypt. When Jacob saw the carts and heard that Joseph was alive, his spirit revived, and he agreed to go. Jacob and his family, 70 in all, moved to Egypt, where they settled in the land of Goshen, the best part of the land. Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years before he died. Before his death, he blessed his sons and Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, adopting them as his own. Jacob was buried in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah were buried. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers feared that he might seek revenge. They sent a message to Joseph, claiming that Jacob had left instructions for Joseph to forgive them. Joseph wept when he received the message. He reassured his brothers, telling them not to be afraid. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph continued to provide for his brothers and their families, showing kindness and forgiveness until his death at the age of 110. The story of Joseph and his brothers is a powerful tale of God's providence, redemption, and the triumph of good over evil. It illustrates how God can bring good out of human sin and suffering, and it highlights the importance of forgiveness, reconciliation, and trusting in God's plan. The story of Joseph has been retold and adapted in various forms, and continues to inspire and teach lessons of faith and perseverance.